Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Piel. I do come from Boston. Today I'm going to talk about what it's like to bring a lean product practice into a large company and what that looks like and how we can try to bring that Agile ethos to a very large, entrenched company doing things the old way. If I can change my slide. Oh, there we go. So I work for a company called Pivotal Labs. We have about 19 offices worldwide, based out of San Francisco with offices in London and New York. But I work in the Boston office. Pivotal Labs is a consulting company. We work with primarily very large companies, and we work with them to try to get a cloud-based, cloud-native culture to get them thinking in terms of lean product practices, extreme programming on the engineering side, and very customer-centered design. All right, cool. So we work with all kinds of large companies, as you can see up here, these and many, many more. These are often very old companies that have been doing things the same way for a very long time. These are a lot of companies that didn't realize until very recently that they were software companies. In 2017, really every company has become a software company. And these are companies that have hired a bunch of developers, oftentimes put aside a lot of money to have a software practice. And they're often sort of surprised and confused when things don't work out that well and they end up with software that doesn't work very well, and they're being disrupted by small startups that are moving very, very quickly. And that's often when they come to Pivotal Labs and say, can you teach us how to do this thing that the startups are doing? And so that is a big part of what we do, is work with these very large companies and work with small teams at a time and get them to try to think in a more lean and agile way. So before I go any further, when I say we work with them, we really, really work with them. We practice what's called pairing. It's a key part of extreme programming, but we do it on the product side also. And what that means is we're actually sitting at a desk. This is one computer with 2 screens, 2 keyboards, 2 mice, but the mice are moving together, and it's really just one computer. Typically, one person's driving and the other person's navigating, and we're working together. So the engineers are really attacking one programming problem at a time. And we do the same thing on the product side, where we pair on emails, we pair on all kinds of different things, and we really try to get this 2 heads are better than one mentality to everything we do. So we work with companies, with teams for about 3 to 6 months at a time, and we're embedded with that team, we're co-located, we're in the same place. Our engineers are paired up in groups of 2. I'm typically paired up with a product manager or product owner from the company. Our designer is paired up with a designer from that company, and we're really in the trenches with that team, making a product together. We talk about doing I do, we do, you do, which is our sort of way of saying, at first I'm going to do a lot of this and you're going to watch me, then we're going to do it together, and by the end I'm kind of just hanging back and going, and then giving some feedback at the end of the day. So we often end up as this little island of lean and agile in the midst of these large companies. Many of these companies have been practicing agile ways of working in software and everything for a long time, and then we end up this one little team that has this mandate to be agile and to work in this lean product way. But we're often sort of surrounded by many teams, many of our peer teams within the same company doing things a very different way. And they sometimes don't have a lot of patience for the product practice, or at least after a couple of weeks, sometimes I hear, well, let's just get going, let's just start building something. And to me, that's like saying, if you had to drive to Washington, D.C., like, we don't have time to look up where we should go, let's just start driving. And so that's an attitude that we sort of have to deal with. Or they'll come to us and they'll say, we have our solution. The most senior technical person at our company has decided what we're going to build. It's going to be fantastic. And yes, we want you to do it lean. You can go to the next slide. But you can do this part lean. Here, you can take this one little part of our solution and build it however you want, be as lean as you want. And we don't always get that mandate to solve a real problem in whatever way actually makes the most sense for that problem. Sometimes our clients come in and they draw these big drawings. This is a real picture I had drawn with a client. And I said, okay, what is this and what parts of this are we going to need to integrate? He said, no, this is what we're going to build. All these boxes with arrows pointing at things, this is what we want to build. And that is something that we deal with all the time. And we have to sort of wind that back and say, okay, who has what problem and how are we going to start solving that? And maybe this is right. In fact, it's probably right. You're probably right. Let's prove it. Let's do it together. Let's find a solution to a problem that a real person has. And you may not surprise you that in this particular case, we didn't end up building these boxes exactly like that. a stock photo of people having a lot of fun at work. We have a lot of fun at work, and before I go on, I don't mean to demonize our clients, and I want to take a moment just to say that these are not typically problems with the people that we're working with. These are systemic, cultural things at these companies that oftentimes have very, very deep roots. A lot of the companies we're working with are over 100 years old, have been doing things and in ways that have worked for sort of the last model of doing business. And so, almost without exception, everyone we deal with is very eager to learn, very excited for this new way of doing things, but as a lot of you, I think, can relate to, it can be really tough, and it can be tough to learn something new doing the same thing for a long time. The example that I want to hone in on for the rest of this talk is around the tool of MVP, or minimum viable product. This, to me, is the real linchpin of a good lean product practice. As it's described in Eric Ries' book, he talks about MVP as this first release, this incredibly lean thing you get out the door incredibly early. You get it in the hands of real users within a matter of weeks, and overnight you're going to quadruple what you think you know about what you're building. This is a tool that we espouse as much as any other, if not more, but it also, because it is often the first part of lean that people hear about, it sometimes is the first one to go into the PowerPoint deck for these executives. And they say, hey, we're going to do this new great thing called Agile, and first let me tell you about MVPs. And they get really excited about MVPs, and like I said, it ends up in a lot of decks, and they tell each other about MVP, and the CTO, hey guys, CTO's really bought in on MVP, we're going to do an MVP. But the problem is, as they keep talking about it and keep talking about it, some of that old corporate culture starts to leach back into the term. And slowly, it becomes something that isn't a couple weeks, but typically, what we see is more like 9 months to a year and a half before people launch an MVP. And typically, it becomes this, the MVP, minimum viable, beautiful product. Yeah, no, it can be really lean, but we can't show our users that. We can't show our users that, it's too ugly. You guys are laughing, so you've probably had this exact conversation before. Or the minimum viable product that I can show my boss. I can't, no, we can't release that. We can't, no, let's just spend a few more months on it. And this is worst of all. It sort of just becomes a synonym for release one. What is the first big release of this product going to look like? You know, our MVP. What's the first big release look like? And this is something that I've seen time and time and time again at these companies, where slowly over time they become inoculated to the real true ethos of MVP, and it leaches back into that corporate culture. I think many of you probably have experience with a company that says, yeah, we're Agile. We do stand-up every morning. We're Scrum. Yeah, super Agile. And then you go into the company and you realize that actually someone at the top is designing this whole solution, carving it out into pieces which are then handed to larger teams, that those little sub-solutions are carved up into smaller things which are given to a bunch of engineers that are bored at work every day because they're not really empowered to solve a real problem. They're just given a slice of someone else's solution to implement, and they have no idea if it'll work. And most of the time, it doesn't work. It doesn't really make anyone's life better or solve any kind of real problem. This is one of my favorite quotes. I'm sure many of you have seen it before from Reid Hoffman. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. And this is something I've said over and over and over again. And this is sort of the key thing of what has been sort of taken out of the MVP as we see it in so many of our clients. Go to the next one. And this is another quote from Eric Ries, this is his new book, The Leader's Guide. I guess it's not even his newest one now. But that it's not about throwing away the desire for high quality. It's just that we don't know what high quality means until we run this series of experiments. And that is sort of the key thing that gets lost when MVP just becomes release number one. So I want to talk today about a strategy that my colleagues and I invented called the shoddiest viable product. We were doing an engagement earlier this year with a Fortune 100 insurance company. Based out of Boston, but with offices literally all over the globe. And we were talking about this and how we had already seen MVP in a couple of slide decks, and how at this particular company, MVPs were that 9-month to a year and a half time scale. And we were sitting around and just said, you know what? I wish we could just create a new term. Let's just teach them something new. I don't want to fight with them about what MVP means. And so we did this. We made up this, the SVP, the shoddiest viable product. And we went to them, we said, MVPs, we love MVPs. We are totally down to build an MVP with you. We love them. Those are those things that take about 6 months to a year, right? Yeah, we're definitely going to get there. Release one, we're on board. Also, let us tell you about this new thing. It's called SVP. It's the shoddiest viable product, and it's something that comes out just weeks after you get started. Oh, it's not pretty at all. It's not nearly as pretty as our MVP is going to be. But it's going to be something that starts to validate our riskiest assumption really, really early on. And we're going to get something in front of real users in weeks and not months. And we got them really excited about this. Oh, you guys invented this new thing, this new product tool. It really wasn't new at all, but it was something that we really hammered home with them. And in this particular case, we went from the first day of active development to launching our product on their home website in 28 days. This completely blew their minds and shattered everything that they had done before in terms of release records. And what we built was to sell a specific line of insurance. We just built an online portal that took your most basic information and then routed you to the call center. Great, thanks so much for starting online. Someone will call you in a few minutes to finish your quote. Now, that didn't help that much. It didn't really fix the problem of people wanting to buy insurance online. But it did get us learning really, really quickly about our biggest assumptions around how people wanted to interact with the website and how they wanted to begin the process of purchasing insurance online. We sold an insurance policy through this portal within 10 hours of launching, and we went on to be one of the fastest growing parts in this company's recent history. It was a huge success, and they loved it, and they were talking about SVP as if it's some real new thing that we had made up. And so I think we looked at each other at this point and we said, like, wow, maybe this is actually a tool that we could keep using. It's pretty good. So now it's time for the video.
It has to be going fast.
Exactly.
Which means we need to make the MAV lighter, a lot lighter.
There's just one passenger instead of 6. With suits and gear, that's another 500. Ditch the life support, don't need it. And we'll get Mark to wear his EVA suit for the whole
Wait a
trip.
second. If he's in his EVA suit, how's he going to operate the controls?
Well, he won't.
If we go remote, we can lose the control panels, the secondary, tertiary comm systems.
Wait a second. You want a remote control descent with no backup comms?
He's not even got to the bad stuff yet. I mean,
We need to remove the nose airlock, the windows, and hull panel 19.
You want to take the front of the ship off?
We're going to have him cover it with pad canvas.
You want to send him into space under a tarp?
Yes.
So that's a clip from a movie called The Martian, which I hope many of you have seen. It's a great movie and great book, and specifically engineers and tech people tend to love it. But I love this scene because they're trying to figure out how to make this ship lighter so that the main character can get it out of the atmosphere. And to do that, they need to rip out absolutely everything that is not absolutely crucial to what they're trying to do. And that's exactly the kind of attitude that we take with our clients. We take the thing that they think needs to be their first release, and then we just gut it. We take the nose off, we put a tarp on it, and it's exactly what we did with this particular insurance project, which was to say, we don't need to bind online. We don't need to do this. We don't even need to validate somebody's email address. Let's wait and see how many people enter bogus email addresses before we worry about validating that. And that's very different from an old culture where you hand an engineering team a giant set of features, and then it's up to that engineering team to decide how robust the error handling needs to be. Why not make that a product decision and empower the product manager to actually say, we don't need error validation on these fields. It's much more important for us to ship sooner. These fields on this thing, it didn't need to withstand a nuclear strike. It didn't need to be this impregnable thing where no one could enter false data. And nobody did enter false data. People know how to enter email addresses. And so by stripping out all of that validation on every single one of our fields, we were able to launch that much faster. Another thing that I love about that clip is that the stakeholder's right there, and he's freaking out. And that is so much of what we do. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're going to do this? And that's something that we deal with all the time. And so working with those stakeholders to get them to understand is part of how we got to launch in just 28 days. Something else I want to address as we talk about the shoddiest viable product. And some of you may have already guessed that in that room that day, shoddy was not the word that we were saying. But that is what we're going to call it here today. People have asked me, does shoddy mean poor quality? Are you advocating that I ship a poor quality product to my customers? The answer is no. And that's where maybe the word shoddy sort of breaks down a little bit. The reason we chose the word shoddy, or the other word, is because we wanted to really staple that Reid Hoffman thing that you need to be embarrassed of this thing, quality, directly to the term, to sort of fight that sort of corporate leeching, that sort of inoculation of the real true daring ethos of that term. But it doesn't mean poor quality. This is a picture of the Wright brothers, I believe 2 summers before the first heavier-than-air manned flight in the history of humans. And before they flew planes, they flew gliders. And before they flew gliders, they flew kites. This is probably the most sophisticated kite ever flown at the time. And it's not poorly made. Orville and Wilbur have pored over every single part of this. They know every single screw, every single piece of wood, every stitch of canvas they've gone over with their hands 1,000 times. This is well built. Just like our code that we shipped in 28 days, we did using test-driven development and pairing. This was very robust code. It had a completely comprehensive test suite backing up every line of code. It was well built. It just didn't have a lot of features. Like this kite. They stripped the features out of it that they knew they would need later because they were focused on working on their riskiest assumption, which in this case was the shape of the wings. So they spent an entire summer just deciding how they would build a glider by first flying kites before they ever worried about where the guy was going to sit or where the engine was going to go. They focused on that riskiest assumption. And so this, to me, is the original SVP. It's not poorly built. It's just stripped out all the features that anyone else who was thinking, oh, maybe I need to go build an airplane right now, they weren't doing this step. They weren't focusing on very, very quickly validating their riskiest assumptions. So as I'm up here talking about the SVP, this tool we invented in the Boston office of Pivotal Labs that we know you all use all the time and have used with many clients, one of the key stakeholders on that insurance project looked me in the face towards the end and said, I just read the Lean Startup. How is this different than MVP? And I said, it's not at all. So this is not a product innovation. This is a public relations innovation. This is me realizing, and our team in Boston realizing, that language is really, really powerful. And when you invent a new term, you have complete control over the definition. You don't need to fight over what it means with the client. I believe that product managers are storytellers, and that storytelling is a really key part of what we do for our teams. You tell the story of the product back to the stakeholders, you tell that story to your teams, to your engineers, you tell that story to the designers, and you make sure that everybody's telling the same story. Every day at stand-up, I try to say it over and over again until I'm blue in the face. Hey guys, remember we were going to build this, but then this happened, and then we heard this from users, so we pivoted and built this? Remember that? That was cool, wasn't it? And you just keep saying it over and over and over again so people remember this story and remember why we're building what we're building. I worked with a different, equally large company right after this insurance company, and they seemed to have a really healthy MVP culture. And I said SVP a couple times as we were doing the kickoff and we were getting started, and it didn't really seem to sit with them. Like, we know what MVP means, dude. Like, we're good. We don't need your new little term. So I said, okay, maybe this isn't perfect for everybody. Maybe this isn't something we always need. But then I could feel the MVP starting to bloat a little bit. And so slowly I started talking about SVPs again. And then the client product owner that I was working with, he started talking about SVP. And now we're talking about the shoddy thing that we got to launch. Maybe the SVP could just be this. And all of a sudden, I could feel it getting leaner. And so we had a conversation, he and I, where we said, you know what, we thought we didn't need this, but it's helping. Frankly, I think it helps me. I think this is something that I really get a lot of use out of by reminding me that this is what true MVP was meant to be. I don't think this is the right the answer forever. I think that if we were all to adopt this tomorrow, it would bloat just as quickly in a couple years. I think the point here is that as product managers, we need to really, really keep an eye on when we start to all drift back into our comfort zone. These terms that try to encapsulate this very, very daring ethos that Eric Ries spelled out in his original book, it's easy to drift from that. We all want to drift back to our comfort zones. I think as product managers, it's our job to keep our eye on what it means to be daring and what it means to be uncomfortable and what it means to be embarrassed, and change the language and change the tools however we need to get our team back on the edge of the knife and not slipping back into our comfort zone. So again, This is not a product innovation, but a storytelling innovation and a public relations makeover. I encourage you all to start inventing terminology. I would love it if you use SVP, but reinvent it, make it up. I'm certainly going to keep reevaluating the language that I use and doing whatever I can to bring us back to that daring ethos, which within this island of waterfall at these large companies is sometimes our best way of reminding the team, hey, we're going to be uncomfortable. We're going to release something we're a little embarrassed about. We're going to move really, really fast and release something and learn about our users incredibly quickly. Thank you very much.